Hello and welcome to my presentation about how I would engage level 2 16 to 18 year olds in a classroom, and also whether I would have a lesson plan. We're going to look at general ideas and specific factors which can affect student engagement at this level. There are three key ideas which inform my teaching practice. They are respect for the student. This means respect their autonomy, respect their goals, and really respect their background. Challenge the student, which means challenge them intellectually but also aspirationally. And self-reliance, by which I mean how you should deal with failure. Now, we all fail sometimes, but what's important is how we deal with failure, and learning how to cope with failure and learning from failure is an important aspect, I think, of self-reliance. One of the relevant factors which affect how this age group engage with your lesson is the fact that 16 to 18 year olds can suffer from social anxiety. Now, I don't mean psychologically, although this age group can have some personal problems which are quite serious, and ESOL students in general do have unsettled backgrounds sometimes, and they may have suffered from traumatic experiences before they enter the country, which is something to bear in mind when you are designing material or selecting activities. But generally this age group can also suffer from social anxiety in the sense that they are very nervous about performing and failing in front of other people. So be sensitive to the difficulty of performing in front of the class. Lots of pair work, lots of group work can avoid performing in front of the class, and if they have to, give them plenty of preparation time. Another important factor which can affect this age group's engagement with your lesson is that 16 to 18 year olds can be defined by subculture. They'll always be interested in talking about what's going on in their life, what's interesting to them, and writing about things which are relevant to them. Speaking about things which are close to their heart is a very useful way of getting students interested in broader topics. So be interested in what this means. Don't copy them, but, respect and be interested in their culture. One way which you can do this is by asking them to bring something in which they think is different from the everyday in their lives, or things that they think are important to them but not important to other people. Making time in each lesson to talk about these kind of things can really help the students feel like you are interested in them. Another important factor with this age group is that 16 to 18 year olds can have a shorter attention span, although this isn't always true. As long as you find the right activity, I generally find 16 to 18 year olds can really focus for a long time. A short attention span can be a sign of creativity, so be prepared to change, accelerate, modify tasks according to student responses. Stay flexible, don't stay wedded to your lesson plan. So, for example, if students are finding reading quite boring, you can get them a bit more engaged in the task by giving them a reading race. Give them 30 seconds, a minute to find all of the numbers in the text and what they mean, or a particular fact. This kind of competitive element can really get them to engage with the task more times, making sure that they focus on a different aspect of reading, for example, reading for gist, reading for specific information. Make sure that your task types do vary, and then you should be able to hold their attention a lot longer. And like I say, if your students seem to have lost interest in whatever activity you're doing, make sure you alternate passive and active tasks. Maybe they just want to do something rather than listen to something. Maybe they want to write something rather than read something. So always bear that in mind. Another factor which can affect how these students engage with your lesson is that 16 to 18 year olds can be less motivated. Sometimes they just don't want to. They don't want to do anything. So it's important to try and find intrinsic or extrinsic motivations which will keep them sustained in the short term, in the case of intrinsic motivations in the classroom, and in the long term in the case of extrinsic motivations. As for intrinsic motivations, I like to use some competitive aspects. I like to use genuinely engaging and interesting material, and also I like to use my personality to really help keep the students motivated. So extrinsic motivation can be the thing which sustains the student throughout the course. So making sure the students have a part in setting their own goals and making sure those goals are smart, like specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, can really help students get a sense of achievement and keep them motivated in the long term. Another relevant factor for this age group is the fact that 16 to 18-year-olds can seek self-esteem. They are worried about whether they're doing the right thing, whether they're doing things well, and they need to be reminded that in a variety of ways. So be prepared to practice and reinforce progress in different modalities. This means not just spoken, but written. Make sure that students are counting how many things they get right, not how many things they get wrong. Speaking as a teacher who's been teaching in a country where they focus on how many mistakes you've made, I can testify to how much of a difference it makes to a student's self-confidence and self-esteem. Another relevant factor for this age group, which impacts how engaged they are, is that this age group are focused on peer group status. So their friends are very important to them, and be prepared to be the person whose opinion is the least important in the room. So make sure that you include a step that involves students commenting, engaging with, evaluating each other's work. One way you can do this is by just getting students to read written work, each other's written work, after they've written it, and vote for the most creative or the funniest or the most interesting. It doesn't have to be scholarly. They can't replace the teacher, but give them a reason to read and a reason to comment on each other's work. Let's bring it all together with an example lesson plan. The aim of this lesson is to practice describing, speculating and deducing with vocabulary about appearance and character. The lead-in, you've got some awkward family portraits. The students have to move around the room, look at the family portraits, choose one of them, the one that they think is yours, and then they should get into groups and talk about which they think is mine as the teacher or yours as the teacher, and make sure the students give reasons. This group setup is a very nice way of avoiding social anxiety and a nice way of getting students to encourage each other and work and exploit peer group pressure. The teacher will choose one of the portraits and tell a little story about the characters in there, background story for the people in the photo, as if it were their own photo. Then the students will listen to a song about family and try and attach some of the idioms and vocabulary from the song and the story the teacher told to one of the portraits.
Family is family in church or in prison. You get what you get and you don't get to pick them.
So you can hear that the song is quite a humorous take on families, but it's got some nice idioms in there that we often use to describe our families. In the next stage, you confess to the students that none of the portraits are really yours, that you made it all up, but ask the students to make up a background story for the people in one of the portraits. Specifically, you should ask the students to write a description of the family, and then ask other students to guess which photo it goes with. In the follow-up stage, the students vote on the funniest, the most outrageous, or the most believable story. And of course, for homework or follow-up, the students can narrate another portrait on PhotoBabble, or do something more written in an app like Write About This. So on to the question as to whether you should have a lesson plan. Yes, of course you should. there should be a lesson plan, but be prepared to adapt it in order that you still meet your goals and maintain the interest of your students in line with their age and level. This might mean throwing some of your lesson plan out, chopping and changing your lesson plan, or adapting or using your bank of activities and materials in a modular way to keep the lesson interesting and engaging for the students. This has been my presentation. I hope that I've given you some ideas as to how I like to keep my students engaged, teach them something, and enjoy teaching at the same time. Thank you for your time.